Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another video on my channel. My name is Whodisdeya, and this is a brief video about CEMU, Breath of the Wild, and the mod by Xalphenos, which has seriously changed the game. It gives pretty massive performance increases, as well as less stutter, less physics slowdown, in general, all around better playability. It's now a must if you're using CEMU. The mod is called Xalphenos FPS mod, and the link to download is included in the description, as well as all the other software that I'll show in this video. My graphics packs are all the usual suspects. No anti-aliasing, contrasty, high quality shadows in the 5K graphics pack. If you're going to be using this mod, first thing you need to know is that it's available only for versions 1.3.0 and 1.3.1, so you'll need to update your game to these versions to be able to use the mod. And now that we got that covered, let's go into how to install it. Installing this mod is very simple. First, you will want to have both your CEMU folder and your folder that your downloaded zip is in open on your desktop. Next thing you will do is extract the mod files. There should be two files in the extracted folder, one named patches.txt and one named rules.txt. Once the extraction is done, take the folder that was extracted and copy it into your graphics pack folder in your CEMU folder. The third thing you'll have to do is when you start CEMU, you'll have to load this mod like you would normally load any graphics pack. Check the mod in the window and then load Breath of the Wild, and your mod is going to be running. You can ignore these other mods that I have in here. Just stick with Botw FPS. The file patches.txt is a file full of mod options that can be toggled on and off by adding a semicolon to the line. There are also experimental settings that you can mess around with and see if you can improve performance. Some users got better performance by messing around with these settings, so if you're having issues or just want to mess around a bit, try it out. In this video, there's a run through Kakariko Village, Gerudo Town, and 2 areas of fighting. Okay, we're going to start it off with this clip here from Kakariko Village, and this is with the FPS mod enabled, as you'll see in the bottom left corner. You will immediately notice that the frame rate is very, very smooth, and much higher, much higher than it was without the mod. Players will still experience frame rate drops in Kakariko, but the mod has greatly improved performance. It's quite incredible, to be completely honest, honestly, how far this emulator has come. It seems to be approaching a point where we might experience very few frame drops soon, if any at all. We might just be locked at 30, all the time, and that is very exciting for emulation, period, and anybody who enjoys emulation. It's funny because there's actually a paid mod that came out at around the same time, and this mod seems to outperform it too. But Zelda towns have always been hard on CEMU. Then if you go to the exact same area without the mod, we see the normal frame dropping that we get when we go into towns, but to a much larger degree. At times it dips into the low 20s, it feels stuttery, and it feels jumpy, and it definitely doesn't feel buttery. Towns have always been rough in this game on CEMU. I mean, Kakariko Village is in basically any town in Zelda hits the frame rate at least a little bit. Stables, towns, anytime people are gathered in this game, there's a frame rate drop. So it's good to see a mod that can hold almost 30 FPS all the time. It's really good to see a performance increase like this. You can also see that without the mod, there's what I call like physics hitching, where it speeds up and slows down, and speeds up and slows down. So without the mod, you have that to deal with as well. I think if you've been playing this game, then you know about Gerudo Town, and you know what Gerudo Town will do to a CEMU player. It'll break them down to their knees. Gerudo Town is very, very hard at times on my rig anyway. But in Gerudo Town, we have the same thing happening. Xalphenos' mod makes the game much smoother. It keeps a higher constant frame rate, is less stuttery, jittery, and jumpy. And I may even say it's buttery. Now don't get me wrong, without the mod, the game is still very, very playable. But the performance increases that you get from Xalphenos' mod make it an absolute must. I mean, it's an absolute must when playing Breath of the Wild on CEMU. I gotta say, I don't even know him, but hats off to him. He did a really good job, and he improved my playing experience greatly. I wonder if the next stop is 60 FPS. Then, when we switch back to Gerudo Town without the mod, we notice a considerable difference in performance. The usual in-town stutter and jitter is present. It's still very playable. It was always playable. It was always very acceptable. But as I said before, seeing the difference now is pretty incredible. It's kind of like switching from console to PC. You don't really notice what you're missing until you get it. And that's kind of what this makes me feel like. It also makes me think that developers should just develop on PC, but you know what's going to happen if you mention something like that. That's a complete other story. Regardless, like I've said 2 or 3 times, hats off to Xalphenos on this. Now that we've gone ahead and gone through 2 of the hardest and roughest areas in the game, let's go ahead and move on to some combat benchmarks. As usual, for combat, I do not sync up gameplay. I included pre-planned routes and ran through them, capturing statistics with each setup. I plan the routes, I find enemies, and I go and run it probably 30 times. I know you cannot produce identical situations in which to benchmark like this, but I want to let the viewers decide with their own eyes which is better in terms of real-life performance, which I see is jumping, shooting, dodging, throwing bombs, swordplay, etc. I show real life fighting that isn't synced because sometimes route-only videos give a false idea to viewers of how high the performance will be when there are a lot of enemies, NPCs, or things like explosions on the screen. One thing I noticed is when actually in combat, the 2 setups actually perform more closely together. Xalphenos' mod still has a healthy lead though, and this is great because originally the frame rate had to be locked at 30 FPS to prevent physics-based issues. But Xalphenos has done a lot of awesome work in unlocking the FPS. So while fighting, you may still get FPS drops. When walking around the world, which is a large amount of your time, in this game, you can enjoy some amazing FPS boosts with it. Through the hours I've spent playing Breath of the Wild on CEMU, I've noticed that frame drops are directly related to the amount of enemies and NPCs that are on the screen. You get drastic drops when enemies load onto your screen. Frames do drop when there are a lot of graphical things going on like explosions, but they are fast and they always recover pretty quickly. If there are a lot of enemies on your screen, you'll get constant frame drops until they're either off your screen or they're eliminated, which is the same thing I guess. When this happens, the frame rate will go back up. It seems that NPCs and enemies put a lot of stress on this game engine. Although you do get these same drops when using Xalphenos' mod, they are much less severe. And that's another win for Xalphenos. There are a few issues with the mod, but fortunately you can fix them right now. There's a milky water glitch where the water will look milky, and there's also some small graphical glitches and like animation glitches. Throwing bombs is one of those things in Breath of the Wild where depending on the situation you'll experience wild frame drops from 10 to 15 frames. Although the mod drops down considerably, I did notice that with the mod enabled the drops are much smoother. They don't feel as stuttery as they did without the mod. Frame drops in general are just really no fun to me, but I've got to say, even with the setup without the mod, the frame drops on CEMU are really not that bad. The only problems are a few graphical issues. The mod is set up to auto-launch GPU fence, causing odd graphical issues. If you go to patches.txt and go to the heading break all forms of frame limiting and put a semicolon before the first line, this will disable GPU fence being launched automatically. Do it for both versions, 1.30 and 1.31. Also, if you have any lines in your gamer profile that auto start GPU fence, you should delete those as well. After you load your shaders, enable GPU fence in options. And that is basically all that I wanted to say about this mod. It's great, it's awesome, it's amazing. If you haven't tried it already and you're playing Breath of the Wild on CEMU, you should definitely go pick it up and give it a try. I'll obviously be uploading more videos as more things are released for CEMU, and I'll be uploading some PS3 emulator videos as well soon, so stay tuned for that. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you like what I do, please like and subscribe, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Peace.